It is a curious phenomenon that a global technology giant could emerge from a small South Korean town. What factors contribute to the company's management being persistently embroiled in legal disputes and ethical controversies, and who really runs South Korea now? Samsung in its early years was a trading company specializing in food. After the Korean War in 1953, South Korea sought to transition from an agrarian to an industrialized economy. Under the leadership of President Park Chung-hee, a policy of supporting big business was adopted to encourage industrialization and economic progress. An important part of this strategy was the formation of large conglomerates that could drive the country's economic growth. One of these companies was Samsung. One of the main things the plan focused on was providing financial support in the form of affordable loans. State-owned banks made loans available at low interest rates. These helped companies cut the cost of financing their projects and speed up business expansion. On top of that, the government gave out direct subsidies to help certain industries and projects. Subsidies were a big help for startups in industries like electronics and chemicals. It meant making a big initial investment. Samsung was able to take advantage of this and invest in new business sectors as a result. Tax breaks were also a big factor. The government gave Samsung tax incentives and paid for holidays, which let the company reduce what it owed in taxes and put the savings toward further development. These moves have made the company more competitive in both domestic and international markets. It might seem like the company is the only one benefiting at first glance. As it turns out, that's not quite right. In return for all this help from the government, Samsung and other companies had to get involved in national projects. These were designed to help develop infrastructure and industry. The government had big plans for these companies as drivers of economic growth. In return, they agreed to develop new industries, create jobs, and boost exports. Samsung has invested a lot of money in the textile industry, which has helped it grow its exports of textile products. The company also expanded its insurance business and sugar industry, which helped it reduce its reliance on a single source of income. One of the most important moves in Samsung's history came in 1969. That's when Samsung Electronics, which is a subsidiary of Samsung, was founded. The South Korean government was involved in helping the electronics industry to grow. As part of this support, the company got access to government funding, which let it jump into the market and start making products right away. Samsung Electronics started out making home appliances like TVs, refrigerators, and washing machines, but the company was able to ramp up production later on, which let it start making more complex electronic components like semiconductors. The bet on electronics paid off. In the 1970s, there was a huge demand for electronic devices and components. Thanks to this decision, the company was able to grab a piece of the global market. Samsung started making its first chip in '83, and by the end of the '80s, it was one of the top semiconductor manufacturers in the world. It's still unclear who the main beneficiary is, the government or the corporate sector. Samsung is a major player in the South Korean economy, contributing about 20% of the total gross domestic product, and about 1/5 of all exports. South Korea does a lot of trading with other countries, including China, the United States, and countries in the European Union. Samsung's products and technologies are what facilitate these interactions. This means that the company's successes and failures can have a big impact on the country's economic stability. The high level of exports brings in foreign money, which makes the national currency stronger. This helps keep inflation down and makes sure the economy keeps growing. Samsung also helps create jobs in related industries. All kinds of other businesses, like component suppliers, logistics companies, and research institutes, also benefit from the company's growth. The more money a company makes, the more it can spend on goods from different suppliers. But you probably don't know much about Samsung's other products besides smartphones and TVs. The company has a strong presence in heavy industry and construction too. Through a subsidiary called Samsung Heavy Industries, is involved in shipbuilding, building drilling platforms, and industrial facilities. It can build some pretty big things like oil tankers, container ships, and cruise ships. But you'll be even more surprised to learn that Samsung was involved in the construction of the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. The company handled the construction process. This included putting up the building's concrete core, steel structures, and unique facade. They also used some pretty advanced lifting techniques to put the Burj Khalifa together. One of these was a concrete lifting system that could lift concrete mixes up to 2,000 feet. On top of that, Samsung also came up with a new way to install the facade panels. The builders got the job done and installed as many as 103,000 glass panels. Thanks to a lot of hard work, one of the most beautiful buildings in the world was constructed. These days, the company has a big impact on young people. Young talents in South Korea are eager to join the ranks of Samsung, believing it to be the pinnacle of career advancement. However, in order to achieve this dream, they have to pass through a difficult selection exam that evaluates their abilities. The exam is highly competitive due to its importance, as Samsung is a symbol of success in the country, attracting thousands of applicants every year. This competition for a position in the company creates enormous enormous pressure on applicants. The company has a history of scandals, sometimes leading to public apologies and even lawsuits. A peculiarity of Korean business is that the founding families control most companies, and leadership is usually inherited from one generation to the next. This approach provides stability but sometimes leads to conflicts, as happened at Samsung in 1966. The quarrel between founder Lee Byung-chul and his son-in-law Kim Chung-hee arose over disagreements in management methods and the distribution of finances. Kim, fearing a loss of influence, revealed information about a secret fund that was used to bribe and facilitate business activities through tax breaks and other benefits. This led to widespread scandal, lawsuits, and public discontent. Following a dispute, Lee opted to disassociate the enterprises under Kim's authority. As a consequence of this dispute, Samsung relinquished its control of the Korea Fertilizer Company. At the time, this business constituted a significant portion of Samsung's operations. Conversely, Kim persisted in his pursuit of manufacturing development. However, his subsequent career was subsequently tainted by a series of scandals. In 1973, he was accused of corruption, resulting in the nationalization of his company by the South Korean government. A further scandal occurred in 1995. Subsequently, law enforcement agencies initiated an investigation of Lee Kun-hee and Samsung on suspicion of tax evasion. The investigation revealed that Lee had utilized fictitious accounts for the purpose of concealing his assets and evading taxation. The total amount of concealed income was estimated to be in the millions of dollars. The primary method of evasion was the use of front persons and companies. The formal owners of Samsung shares were in fact under Lee's control. Such a scheme permitted him to evade taxation and conceal the true extent of his wealth. In response to mounting public unrest, the South Korean government was compelled to take prompt and decisive action. Law enforcement authorities conducted a series of searches and interrogations, which resulted in the collection of a substantial amount of evidence. Following an investigation, the court brought charges against Lee Kun-hee for tax evasion amounting to approximately $11 million. This indictment was a significant detriment to the reputation of Samsung. Despite the company's continued economic influence in the country, Lee ultimately pleaded guilty and agreed to cooperate. The court subsequently handed down a 2-year suspended sentence and a fine of $98 million. This sentence was regarded as a compromise. On the one hand, Lee was found guilty and punished, but on the other hand, he evaded actual imprisonment, which prompted criticism from the public. In the aftermath of the verdict, Lee Kun-hee temporarily relinquished his role in the company's management structure in an effort to mitigate the negative attention directed at him and the organization. Nevertheless, his influence over Samsung remained considerable. Subsequently, upon the conclusion of his probationary period, he resumed his role as an active manager of the company. Perhaps the most significant scandal occurred in 2016, involving Lee Jae-yong and President Park Geun-hye. Lee Jae-yong, also known as Jae Lee, is the heir to the Samsung Group, a business conglomerate founded by his father, Lee Kun-hee. He assumed the role of primary leadership following his father's cardiac arrest. Park Geun-hye was elected South Korea's first female president in 2012. However, an important detail in the case was her close friend Choi Soon-sil. In October 2016, South Korean media began publishing information indicating that Choi had interfered in government decisions and used her connections to pressure major companies, including Samsung. The objective of these threats was to secure financial contributions for 2 non-profit foundations under her control. In February 2017, Jae Lee was taken into custody. The charges against him were based on allegations that he secured multi-million-dollar payments to Choi Soon-sil's foundations in exchange for privileges from the government. Specifically, the prosecutors alleged that Samsung sought to garner support for the approval of the merger of 2 subsidiaries. The proposed merger was of significant importance to the Lee family, as it would serve to consolidate their control over the conglomerate. Furthermore, it would facilitate the transfer of leadership to the designated heir apparent. In conclusion, in August 2017, the court found Lee Jae-yong guilty of all charges and imposed a sentence of 5 years imprisonment. A year later, an appeals court reduced the sentence to 2.5 years suspended, resulting in Lee's release. The court considered that the defendant had acted under duress and intimidation. Nevertheless, the decision was not met with universal satisfaction. Notwithstanding the court scandals, Samsung has established close ties with the South Korean government, which are frequently characterized by interdependence. Concurrently, the government offers Samsung a range of economic incentives and legislative initiatives. In return, the company is actively involved in the economy, particularly in areas pertaining to digitalization and global trade. Nevertheless, any drastic measures taken against the corporation have a detrimental effect on the national GDP and employment rates. Consequently, the South Korean government is confronted with the challenge of achieving a delicate equilibrium between providing support to major corporations and fostering an environment conducive to economic growth. Should they prove unsuccessful, the country could well be confronted with a severe crisis.